Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is 20 overpowered builds in just 20 minutes. That's right, 20 different very powerful builds in Elden Ring in just 20 minutes time. They're all going to be in the description below like last time, and we're going to sum this up as kind of a year in review and to celebrate 2022. Let's get to this. First one up is the Wing of Astel. The Wing of Astel I did recently, and I was surprised at the amount of damage it can do. It's highly buffable, and it can be buffed by Terra Magica and the Spellblade set. It does a ton of damage while also doing posture damage. It's also incredibly quick to cast, very easy to use, and has virtually no learning curve. The Wing of Astel scales very well with INT, by the way, so it's very easy to do this at 150. All you need is the minimum stat requirements of 17 dex, 7 strength, and then 60 intelligence will pretty much max the damage on this thing. The Wing of Astel is incredibly powerful, and not only is it quick to cast, as you can tell there, and Astel does take additional gravity damage, it shreds pretty much any boss in Elden Ring. It's fantastic to use as a mage. And for this build, we have the Wing of Astel. Any staff will do, any seal will do. This is boosted by the Spellblade set, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman for some defense, and then we have the Magic Tear, and you can throw in the Faith Tear if you need it for buffs, or the Defense Tear works as well. Another recent one that absolutely shreds is Ordovis Greatsword. I didn't realize how good this weapon was, but Ordovis Greatsword has an awesome Ash of War that shreds through enemies, and though it is slow to use, it also builds up a lot of posture damage while doing a lot of physical damage, which kind of negates the resisted holy damage part. It scales very well, the Ash of War with strength, possibly 70-80% or more comes from the strength stat, so you're going to get a lot of damage on all of the enemies in the game, even when resisted. Other than the final boss, because the resistances are so high, it can shred pretty much all the bosses in the game while doing immense posture damage. For this build, we'll need Ordovis Greatsword plus 10, any seal will do. I went with the Crucible Knight set because it looked really cool with this, the Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Godfrey Icon will boost this because it's charged. It is a charged skill. Ritual Swords Talisman, and then the Holy Tear will give it a little extra damage as well. Next up is the Antspear Rapiers. By the way, almost all of these are on 1.07, 1.08. There's a few on 1.06, but I picked all ones that are still good now, and these are still epically awesome. Why are they epically awesome? Because they have 50 innate rot on them, and you can put an Ash of War on top of that. You can actually do bleed, rot, and poison all at the same time, which is very overpowered. And even with the nerf, I think it was on 1.06 for the status effects, it still works incredibly well. It's still really powerful. They're incredibly fast. They can get that rot build up, that poison build up with some bleed in there as well. These are very powerful. The Antspear Rapiers are definitely worth grabbing. If you want to do status effects, these are the way to go. Now, this was on my poison build, so both these had Poison Moth Flight on them, but you can add Seppuku to one and then switch out the Dragon Crest, and you can actually get the buff from the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, along with the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis. Those will work as well on the consecutive attack tier to boot. Next up is a personal favorite. The Envoy's Longhorn, the bubble build, really is quite good. And even though on the Ash of War, the posture damage I think was nerfed and it does less, or I don't know if it does posture damage anymore, it still absolutely shreds. Does a ton of damage in general, and especially when used against larger targets. This can obliterate dragons, by the way, and it can also destroy the death birds that are weak to holy because they are larger targets too and will get shredded by the bubbles. It's really a fantastic weapon. The Envoy's Longhorn became a meme, but it's also an incredibly powerful weapon in Elden Ring, and it's a lot of fun to use. For this, we'll need the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10. We have the Envoy's Crown, which will also boost it by 15%. You can boost it further by the Black Dumpling, proccing that as well. Dragon Crest, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then we have the Holy Tear to maximize the damage. You can also poison proc this to get extreme damage at it and destroy dragons, which it completely obliterates. Speaking of dragons, here's a dragon here on the Bleed build. Now, this is the Bleed Twin Blade build. You can do this on the Godskin Peelers, the Twin Blades, the Bandit Curved Swords, all of that. As long as they both have Seppuku on them, you will absolutely shred the majority of bosses in the game. Everybody already knows this is an incredibly powerful build. Obviously, it's been meta relevant for a very, very long time. Incredibly damaging to bosses, chunking them for percentages of HP while also doing relatively good AR. They're undoubtedly overpowered, and with the Twin Blades specifically, you'll hit 6 times. The Godskin Peelers and Bandit Curved Swords are excellent as well, and they can completely destroy the majority of bosses in Eldenring. For this, we have the Godskin Peelers plus 25 with Seppuku on both. Any seal will do. The Raptor's Black Feathers will boost your jump attack. You can use the White Mask if you're into the style for an extra 10%. Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Claw Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman or Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Consecutive Attack Tear as well. Next up is the Fire build. I have 2 variants on the Fire build in here, but this is the one with the dual seals that utilizes the Flame Pillars and then Giant's Flame Take Thee as well, because they can both be boosted up to 44% by dual wielding the seals. I have a video in here that can help you shred Malenia. If you're having difficulty with her, the Flame Pillars work excellent on her. They're unbelievable, and she takes the full complement of fire damage with 0 fire resistance. We have dual Giant Seals, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation if you want a poison proc, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, and then we have the Fire Tear, Fetid Pots, and Boluses as well if you want to do extreme damage with these. They're highly buffable, they do a lot of damage, and they can also knock Malenia down as well. Next up, another personal favorite is the Lightning build. ADLS or Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike can be buffed like crazy. It has a lot of buffability in the fact that it's just lightning damage, you can stack everything, and then generic boosts like Hellish Shabriri, Poison Procking, even using Lord of Blood's Exaltation ahead of time as well will get in that damage. And with its damage potential, yeah, there's a little bit of RNG, but it really smacks, especially dragons. As you can tell there, they take additional lightning damage. It's insane. The video for this one in the description has the 150 stats. I'm using the Golden Order Seal because it outdoes the boost at 80, 80, 80 Faith, and INT. You would use the Gravelstone Seal otherwise. Jellyfish Shield, Mushroom Crown, Black Dumpling, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon, Red Feathered Branch Sword, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, Lightning Tear, Fetid Pots, and Boluses. If Bleed is really powerful, then Frost and Bleed, as mentioned in my last video, is almost as powerful, if not more powerful in certain circumstances. You can actually proc both, and in this instance, I really like using the Twin Blades here for the 6 hits, for stacking them, and then using Chilling Mist on one of them. That Ash of War will allow you to proc Frost without having to really scale it with intelligence, saving you that stat and making it very doable at 150. These are really powerful. It's incredible when you do get the double procs at the same time. It takes off a lot of HP at any given time because of those procs that come off, and it's just awesome. It's an awesome build, has a lot of damage, and then after the Frost is proc, they can continue to take additional damage for a minute from the Frost procking, which is really, really awesome. You continue to do Bleed and absolutely shred the majority of bosses in the game with this. Bleed builds and Bleed Frost builds, they're a reason why they're the meta. They're incredibly powerful. For this, we have the Twin Blades. We have one with Seppuku, one with Chilling Mist, Giant Seal. Any seal will do, though. Raptor's Black Feathers for the jump attack bonus, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Green Turtle Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, or Millicent's Prosthesis. We have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Claw Talisman, and then we also have the Successive Attack Tear, and then we have the Faith Tear in there as well to make it easier to do boost like Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. Next up, we have Death's Poker and the Death Ritual Spear. You can actually combine these two. You can use the Ash of War on one, like Death's Poker. I have a build for this, where it leaves out the trail, does intense frost damage while also continuing to just do damage in general, and then throw down the Death Ritual Spear Ash of War, and it does a ton of damage. You can obliterate a lot of the bosses this way. If you're able to get them both off and time it well, it destroys pretty much anything. It's an awesome combination to do. You can kind of just stack damage on them, and it turns the Death Ritual Spear into a very powerful weapon along with Death's Poker. For this, we have the Death Ritual Spear plus 10, Death's Poker plus 10. The Spellblade set will boost both of these by 8% in total. Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, and then we have the Magic tier as well. You can also use Terra Magic with this to maximize the damage. Next up is another personal favorite, and that's the Giant Crusher. The Giant Crusher is incredibly powerful. It can be buffed like crazy, and reaching around 1,000 AR damage, whatever it is, it can be buffed to the point where it one-hits a lot of the enemies, especially field bosses in the game. This is incredibly powerful, highly buffable, and when you do pull it off and you get the one hit, it really feels good. For this wonderfully powerful weapon, we have the Giant Crusher plus 25. Any seal will do. You can add damage with Mushroom Crown and Black Dumpling, Seppuku to bring your health down, Axe Talisman, Red Feathered Branch Sword, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, and then we have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation to boost everything, as well as the Charge tier. This does a lot of damage, and as you can tell with the stats here, you can do a lot. As long as you get to around, I would recommend 80 strength to really maximize this, especially on the later journeys, but I did a lot with 70 strength as well. 60 would probably be the minimum requirements. Next up here we have Black Flame, which is incredibly powerful, and you can even stand back with regular Black Flame and do a lot of percentage damage. Even bosses with high health pools, it actually tends to even work better on with percentage damage and the fire damage. It's incredibly powerful, very easy to use, and you can get it very early in the game as well. Godslayer's Greatsword is what we have here. We have 2 Godslayer seals to maximize the boost, Black Flame Monk Set, Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, and then we have the Fire Tear in there as well to maximize the damage and turn this to a very powerful build. Next up here is the Night Mage. If you have 2 Staves of Loss, you can boost Night Sorceries by 60%, making Night Comet incredibly powerful. Malenia can't see Night Comet either, so it actually makes the fight with her incredibly trivial, and it works for all bosses in the game. This is a really powerful build. It can be boosted by the Godfrey icon as well. Night Comet actually beats out regular Comet when you use both staffs for that 60% boost. It's incredibly powerful, has great range. As you can tell here, Malenia really can't dodge it because she can't see it. Does a lot of damage to her, but it does a lot of damage to all the bosses in the game. Night Comet is awesome. For this, we have 2 Staves of Loss. You can bring your health down if need be. Finger Seal, we have the Godfrey icon, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, or Red Feathered Branch Sword, Graven Mask Talisman, and then we have the Magic tier as well to maximize our damage, and Night Comet truly does a lot of damage. Next one is another favorite that made it in my last video as well. This is a really fun one, but this is the all poise and pretty much tank every hit build and heal back from it. This is kind of a variant on the shield build, which is also overpowered. This is really powerful too, because you can use the full Blowgoat set, as you can tell here, the Blasphemous Blade to heal back any chip damage you take, Endure on a dagger to maximize the hits you can take, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Blowgoat Talisman, Pearl Drake Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then I think I had the Flame Tear and the Defense Tear in there as well. And I ended up doing, I think, a maximum of 80% physical damage resistance with Endure, which is epic. And honestly, with the Blasphemous Blade, you can heal back any chip damage that you take. Next up is another personal favorite, and that's the Marais Executioner sword. Believe it or not, this was the first overpowered weapon I ever used in Elden Ring, and it made the game very, very easy. It has a long casting time, but it benefits from the Godfrey icon, all the successive attack stuff that you can put together. It does a ton of damage, and it can obliterate most of the bosses in the game. Yeah, it's a little bit slow, but does it matter when it does that much damage? When something does that much damage, it doesn't matter how slow it is. It's incredibly powerful. You're not going to get hit too much because you're going to be destroying bosses before they can ever even touch you. Marais Executioner is a personal favorite and an awesome weapon. For this, we have Marais Executioner Sword plus 10. Any seal will do. The Black Dumpling can boost this further. Kindred of Rot's Exaltation if you want a poison proc. If not, Maleficent's Prosthesis. Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. Godfrey icon. Then we have the Shard of Alexander, the Magic tier, successive attack tier as well. And you can use Fetid Pots and Boluses as well if you need a poison proc. This has a really high damage cap, so keep that in mind. You can do whatever generic damage boost to it, and you're going to get a ton of damage out of it because that's what it does, a lot of damage. Next up, and although this dragon does take additional fire damage and ends up killing me, interestingly enough, at the end of this clip, is the Blasphemous Blade. Now, the Blasphemous Blade, the full build for itself, not including it in other builds where it's niche and it heals you back from blocking and things like that. Using it just on its own is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly buffable. As you can tell, we were doing 10,000, 12,000 damage a piece per hit there to this dragon. It's insane. For a pure Blasphemous Blade build, we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10, Black Dumpling, Dragon Crest Great Shield, or I guess I had regular Dragon Crest here, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then you're going to want that Fire Tear as well. I also Poison procced it because the damage cap is also great on the Blasphemous Blade, and you can also heal back while using it too. Speaking of which, on our next build, which also utilizes it. And this utilizes just that. This is the block everything and heal back any chip damage build. This was in the first video with the 10. I believe a lot of the ones there were included here, although I did mix everything up. And by the way, if you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel. If this video helped you, or you love all these builds, or even some of them, definitely check those out and hit the subscribe button. In the meantime, you can block everything with Scholar Shield, the Fingerprint Shield, and heal back any chip damage with the Blasphemous Blade. And we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10, the Fingerprint Shield, any seal will do, any staff will do as well. The Demi-Human Staff scales well at earlier levels for the Scholar Shield, Shard of Alexander, Great Shield Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Great Jar's Arsenal, and then we have the Fire Tier, as well as you can throw in the Defense Tier, and that honestly is a fantastic build. That one makes the game easy. And now, before we did a basic fire build with the buffs and stuff for the spells, incantations rather, as far as this goes, you can also use the Magma Blades. They're incredibly powerful as well. I put the Godskin Noble obviously to sleep to see how much damage you can do, but these stack a ton of damage. The Ash of War scales highly with Faith. They're incredibly awesome to use the Ash of War just to spam it on. You get a ton of magma that just trails, stacking damage while also hitting in. I believe it benefits from consecutive attacks as well. Does a ton of damage together. They're really awesome. And once again, it's the Ash of War that really makes it, and it's that awesome scaling it has with the Faith stat to give it an incredible damage potential. And as you can tell here, we're using the dual Magma Blades, which are very hard to get given the 1% drop rate, but they're well worth getting. They're awesome to have, and they're really powerful. For this one, we have dual Magma Blades, we have the dual seals, the Fire Monk set, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, and then we have the Fire Tier as well, as you can also throw in the Faith there too if you want an even further boost, but I believe my Faith was at 80 here. These are very, very good for damage. Next up is Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear. Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear is really powerful. It's also highly buffable, and it does a ton of damage. The amount of damage it does is insane. It builds up bleed very quickly. It's super powerful, and anybody that's used Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear knows that it's been powerful since the game came out, and it's still incredibly powerful now. Although it keeps you stationary, the amount of bleed and fire damage it does is insane. We have the Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear plus 10. Any seal will do. I Poison procced, Fire Scorpion Charm, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, Shard of Alexander, and then we have the Fire Tier as well. This thing does a lot of fire damage, a lot of bleed, and it's super powerful. Next up is Comet Azur. Comet Azur is something I didn't really think of in the last video, but it's so obvious. Comet Azur is incredibly powerful. Obviously, it's overpowered. It can wipe bosses completely off the map with the right setup. It absolutely destroys the majority of the bosses in the game when timed right, and it's just insane. It can be buffed too by Terra Magica, the Magic Tier, and the right setup, and you can even buff it with generic boosts such as Golden Vow and Hellish Brewery that now lasts 40 seconds instead of 20, giving Comet Azur an awesome and insanely powerful beam. It does insane damage. It really does do a lot of damage. It's a lot of fun to use. It's obviously a staple for mages, as I mentioned, and it really is powerful. It's something that you can use as a mage to wipe any boss you're having difficulty with. Certain bosses in the game that stand there are even easier. Comet Azur is awesome in terms of damage. For the Comet Azur setup that I've used, I used Lucette's Staff and the Glintstone Crown for the Comet Azur boost. They have I think Sorcerer's Sellen's questline for that. And then the Jellyfish Shield, any seal will do for buffs. Graven Mask and Graven Skull Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then we have the Magic Tier along with the Infinite FP Tier, which is obviously another staple for Comet Azur, giving you that beam for 15 seconds straight. And last but not least is the other holy one that I like that's in here that I did on my channel, Marika's Hammer. Now, Marika's Hammer may be a little bit less in the overpowered department, but I actually think it is overpowered. Even after the recent nerfs, it still does a lot of posture damage, including with the Ash of War. It can be buffed like crazy. Much like Ordovis Greatsword, it gets a lot from its Ash of War from the strength stat too, which can sort of negate the holy damage aspect of the fact that it's very resisted in Eldenring. It does a ton of damage. You can smack down and get a ton out of it, and it has a wide area range to boot. For this awesome setup, we have Marika's Hammer plus 10. Any seal will do. You can use the Black Dumpling for the boost. Dragon Crest Shield Talisman. We have the Shard of Alexander. Ritual Swords Talisman. The Sacred Scorpion Charm. And then the Holy Tear will also boost this as well. What a great way to end the year on this channel. And now there's a library here, so if you need any of these builds, they're in there. If you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel. If you love overpowered PvE builds, there's a ton of awesome builds on there. And thanks for watching, everybody. It's been awesome. It's been great since I started this in late May, early June. I hope everybody has a fantastic new year as we go into 2023 and continue this channel. I look forward to that. Thanks for watching, everybody, and Happy New Year.